Hello everybody, I'm Justin with Shock Therapy and we're here to show you how to install the dual rate spring kit on a Honda 1000R. This spring kit is going to do wonders to the ride quality of this vehicle. The factory Honda 1000R ride quality is extremely stiff. Our dual rate spring kit is going to plushen up the ride quality tremendously and eliminate most of the rear bucking that's prevalent in the car. All of our dual rate spring kits are made in the USA and warranted for life. They will take a set one time over the lifespan of the first 200 miles. Once it's settled one time, adjust the ride height, they will stay there the life of the car. This dual rate spring kit is a relatively easy installation and should only take 1 to 2 hours. So let's go over to the workbench and take a look at the parts that are included in the spring kit. So on the bench to my left is a complete spring kit for our 1000R. This kit comes with 8 coil springs, 2 front uppers, front lowers, rear uppers, and rear lower springs. As always, the coil springs are marked on top as to where they're located on the car so that you can't make a mistake and put the wrong spring on the wrong side. As always, we recommend that you lay all the components out on the bench before you start. It helps with the installation, and also you can make sure that all of the parts are included that should be included. Now that you've seen that, let's go over to Stevie and take a look at the installation.
Always remember to wear your safety glasses.
Step 1 is to jack the front of the car up. Make sure that you use jack stands. Remove the hood to get access to the upper shock bolts. Loosen the shock bolts. Remove the shocks from the car. Do one side at a time because the shocks are side specific. You do not want to mix them up from left to right. With the shock on the bench, check the springs that are set aside for the front. They are marked upper and lower front. Using the spring compressor of your choice, tighten the spring package, getting access to the lower spring perch. Remove the lower spring perch retaining clip. With the clip out of the way, you can remove the spring perch. Remove the factory springs, saving the factory spring divider. With the shock in the vise, you can break the preload collars and crossovers loose. Using a tape measure that is butted against the bridge of the shock, set the preload measurement in the front to 4 1/4 inches. Set the crossover measurement to 6 1/2 inches. Both of these measurements are set to the bottom of the crossover or the bottom of the preload ring. With these rings in place, go ahead and lock them down. Install the new upper spring. Install the factory spring divider with the long end facing the bottom of the shock. Install the new lower spring. Make sure that the ends of the springs touch the plastic divider on the opposite sides of the divider. Compress the spring package. Install the lower spring perch. Install the spring perch retaining clip. Loosen the springs while lining up the lower loop and spring perch. Install the shock back on the vehicle, starting with the upper bolt. Leave both the upper and lower bolts loose until the end of this installation so that we can make sure the ride heights are correct. Repeat these steps for the opposite front shock. With the front shocks installed, remove the jack stands and lower the car onto the ground. Head to the rear of the car. Jack the car up and install the jack stands. Loosen the shock hardware. Remember to do one shock at a time, as they are side specific and you do not want to mix them up.
That's insane, dude.
Remove the shock from the car and set on the bench. Check that the springs that are left are marked rear springs, upper and lower. Compress the spring package, giving you access to the spring perch and spring perch clip. Remove the clip and remove the spring perch with rock guard. Take the time to notice that the spring perch has a recessed notch out of it that matches a spot in the lower loop of the shock. When we install this again, we'll make sure that these line up. Remove the factory springs, but save the factory spring divider. With the shock in the vise, break the preload collar and crossover rings loose. With the tape measure butted against the bridge of the shock, set the preload collars to 2.5 inches. This is measured to the bottom of the preload collar. Set the crossover rings to 7.25 inches. With these in place, lock them down. Install the new upper rear spring. Install the factory divider with the long end facing the bottom of the shock. Install the new lower spring. Make sure that the ends of the springs are touching the divider on opposite sides. Compress the spring system, giving you access to install the lower spring perch. Remember, the spring perch has a recessed notch in it that's designed to lock itself into the lower loop of the shock. Install the lower spring perch. Install the spring perch retaining clip. Remove the tension from the spring system, while at the same time you are lining up the recessed notch in the spring perch with the lower loop of the shock. Install the shock on the rear of the car, starting with the upper hardware. Remember, keep all the hardware, upper and lower, loose until the end of the installation. Repeat these steps on the other side. With the rear shocks installed on the car, remove the jack stands and drop the car back on the ground. Now it's time to settle the suspension. You cannot do this by jumping up and down on the car, front to back. You must drive the car around the block, or at least back and forth 4 to 5 times, hitting the brakes and the gas to settle the suspension. At the final time, come to a stop without using the brakes. All ride heights must be measured and checked with the driver in the car. The front ride height should be 13.5 inches. This is measured from the lower control arm mount rearward closest to the firewall, from the bottom of this mount to the ground. The rear ride height should be measured from the skid plate at the back of the car to the ground. Always have the driver in the vehicle. If the ride heights are spot on, you can go ahead and leave it alone, moving to the next step of checking crossover heights. Crossover height in the rear should just be checked to make sure that the gap between the crossover and the plastic spring divider is 2.5 inches. The crossover gap in the front should be 1.5 inches. This is an approximation, and it can be good if it's 1/4 of an inch one way or the other. With ride height set, your fill-in driver can leave. If the ride heights need to be changed, raised, or lowered, the reason that we leave the hardware loose is because some people prefer to pull the shock off the car and set their new preloads on the bench. Other people prefer to set the preloads on the car. Now that the ride heights are perfect, you can tighten all the shock hardware. Since it is 12mm hardware, torque all of these bolts to 95 foot-pounds. Install the hood, making sure that it locks into the factory retainer in the front and the rear latches are tightened. Thank you, Steve, for showing us how to install that spring kit on a 1000R. Hopefully your installation went as easy as Steve's did. As always, our springs are made in the USA and warranted for life. They will not continue to settle like the factory springs tend to do, but they will take one set over the first 1 to 200 miles of driving the car. We want you to check the ride heights after you put some time on it. If the car is settled, raise the car up to the ride spec we've given you, and they will stay that way for the life of the car. People never seem to remember the accessories that they've added to their car. It's very easy to add 200 or 300 pounds to it without knowing, and the car will sit lower. Check your ride height periodically as you start adding accessories to it. Raise the car back up to the spec that we recommend, and it'll return your ride quality to the plush system that you had once the system was new. If you like the ride quality that this spring kit gave you, there is much more potential inside of the shock. If you want more ride quality out of the car, look into our internal modifications, or RIS, Ride Improvement System. The Ride Improvement System is designed to work with the spring kit you already have. The two together give you the pinnacle in ride quality in a Honda 1000R. Due to the fact that this car is so stiff stock, the improvement from our system to the OEM ride quality is drastic. Probably the biggest improvement of any UTV on the market. If you'd like to purchase more products for the Honda or any other UTV, visit us at shocktherapist.com or call us at 623-217-4959. Yep.
Why did we make
Are you ready yet?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. I'm sorry, work happens. Too much noise. Are you actually ready now?
Yeah.
I don't get an action or anything. Dual rate spring kit on a Honda. Okay, let's not waste any more time. Take a look at the components that are on the bench that are included in the spring kit. Let's not waste any more time and take a look at the components that are included in the spring kit on the workbench. Off, you're dancing with me.
Did you do speed today?
No,
What did you do?
I know, right?
Are we doing a samba line? What is this? Yeah, of course you'd be in the back of all the girls, Kenny.
Hey, get the offset, my
So this is what happens when you have to work. You don't get to go on the fun little activities like all the other people do. That work. That's what happens when you're the Talon around here.
Yep. Talon ain't got no time for prissy parties. Not to be a dick, Steve, I feel kind of honored because I got a private tour with Justin.
So I haven't even seen it.
Die.
Justin,
Kill yourself.
this is how I know you don't like me. Thank you.
Why, thank you, Mr. Belvedere. What are you doing, Jason?
Cleaned up skid marks.
Why are you cleaning up skid marks?
The Honda did burnouts.
Who was driving the Honda and doing burnouts?
I was.
Why were you doing burnouts?
Because you said to pin it and slam on the brake.
I said to use.
to win it, brother.
I said to get on it and use the brakes hard. That doesn't mean burn out on Justin's $100,000 factory floor, bro.